Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our annual Founder of the Year event. My name is Leif Johnson, and I am a financial consultant for Truist Investment Services and the Lippman Peters Group here in Melbourne, Florida. I'm the current chairman of the Founders Forum Board of Directors, and I have the pleasure of introducing you all to this event this evening. Before I do that, though, I want to take a quick minute and tell you a bit about Founders Forum as an organization. So Founders Forum was established in 1985 as a nonprofit organization dedicated to the needs of entrepreneurs right here in Brevard County. The original plan was to provide a resource where new businesses could meet with funding sources, and potential investors. And from there, Founders Forum has evolved into an educational and networking organization where entrepreneurs and other local business professionals can learn from and build relationships with many of the region's most successful business leaders. So our mission is specifically to inspire, educate, and connect entrepreneurs. We're a volunteer, board-led organization with 12 current board members, including Jamara Wilson of Progressive Cleaning, Bill Williams of A Cut Above Video Productions, Eric Wright of Space Coast Magazines, Catherine Rudloff of We Venture, Rob Broling of Car Rigs and Ingram, Lee Garner, CPA, Alex Dunham of Creative Network Innovations, Dale Dupree of the Sales Rebellion, Matt Chestnut of Space Florida, Steve Thomas of Lowndes Law, and Ryan Brown of Patriot Investment Partners. And as a team, we're typically organizing and hosting several events a year to bring the community together in support of our mission. So this brings us to our event this evening, which we call Founder of the Year. This is traditionally our signature event, and in previous years, this was held in person to provide the opportunity for the business community to come together and support the finalists being recognized by our board of directors. 2020 was a bit of a mess, as you all know, so we are recognizing our featured founders a bit later than we normally would. Additionally, we're not picking a winner, but rather choosing to recognize each as a significant contributor to the vibrant business community that continues to thrive, again, right here in the Space Coast of Florida. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the host and MC for this evening, Mr. Eric Wright. So we chose Eric because, unlike me, he is an accomplished speaker and author, having facilitated many interactions between professionals over the course of his career. Something I learned recently of Eric is that he is a published author of 3 books and has taught leadership and management seminars on 4 continents. In my quick time of getting to know Eric as a fellow board member, primarily in quarantine, I can say with confidence that I've learned that Eric is passionate about the local business community, striving to make improvements in others' lives as they pursue their passions in their work. He has valuable insight that he shares generously and has a sharp wit that I have come to appreciate. And so without further ado, I will hand over the virtual microphone to our host for the evening, Eric Wright.
Thank you, Leif. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we delayed the awarding of our 2020 Founder of the Year presentation until today. In years past, we had selected a single individual, as Leif said, or co-founder to recognize as our, quote, Founder of the Year. We've come to understand, though, that due to the diversity of the businesses we honor, it's unfair to recognize one as more deserving than another. In our effort to fulfill our mission to inspire, educate, and connect entrepreneurs, we have selected 3 contributors to our community to equally honor this year. This year, our Founders of the Year are Brian Lightle, who has for decades been one of the most innovative and successful commercial real estate brokers in the region. But beyond that, his engagement in organizations like the Area Chambers and the EDC of Florida's Space Coast has served as an outstanding example to all of us of that principle of building and serving the community in order to build and serve your own business. Next, Dana Kilborne. You know, it's rare for many of us to think of entrepreneurialism and banking in the same train of thought, but that is certainly true of Dana, who's been involved in the founding, the growing, and then the selling of community banks, and now is on a new iteration with Cypress Bank and Trust. Unfortunately, due to other commitments, Dana's unable to join us live for this event, but we'll be hearing from her through the marvels of technology. And finally, Peter Dyson. In a region that is famous for technology, Peter's company, Modus Operandi, is a leader in helping both government organizations and private companies to gather and exploit the gold mine of data. Peter's one of the most fascinating people I know, a technologist, a business leader, an avid sailor, and a chess champion who has been guiding the growth and influence of Modus Operandi since launching the company back in 1984. As in recent years, we've produced short videos of each founder with the goal of giving a better understanding of what led to their success. After each video, we'll have a short Q&A with each founder. If you would like to ask a question, enter it in the chat box. And here is our first final. Brian Lightle.
Team LBR is a full-service commercial real estate services firm based here on the Space Coast. We offer office, retail, and industrial commercial real estate services. We lease, we sell, we manage, and we consult. We're also licensed throughout the Southeast in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and provide services for different clients in those markets as well. Been on the Space Coast here for over 32 years providing these services, and we're very unique in the fact that we're a true team of specialists. We represent landlords with regards to their properties and helping them get the properties leased in a very proactive manner, going out and searching for their tenants and getting their properties leased up. We also manage the assets for them as we're going along on this. Everything from collecting of rents, paying bills, physical management. We have our own full-time facilities manager, and on the other side, on the corporate services side, we represent tenants, a number of large office, retail, and industrial tenants where they reach out to us and hire our firm to help them get new space, whether it's purchasing a building, leasing a space, and that's another side of the expertise on the representation side. So we represent both landlords and tenants to provide them the level of services they need. 32 plus years ago, a fraternity brother of mine from college, Miles Wilkinson, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm starting a company here in Melbourne in '87. Would love to have you come up and join me. Your cold calling skills, your sales skills, et cetera, would do very well in this industry." So in March of '88, I came up and joined Miles at Corporate Property Group at his company. And over that 8-year period, just really dove into the community, worked hard on cold calling and prospecting. He and I became partners for about 8 years. And in '96, Miles said, I really just want to develop. I don't want to be a third-party broker. And we parted as friends. And in July of '96, I started Brian Lightle Incorporated, which has grown today to be Lightle, Beckner, Robison Incorporated over those years. Rob Beckner joined me 20 years ago and is just a phenomenal young man that's worked very hard to develop his business and grow it with his reputation in the community and do really well. So he joined me over 20 years ago. Jeff Robison, our retail team director, joined us over 15 years ago. Super guy, strong, been in the pharmaceutical field, understands sales and details. And then over 10 years ago, Mike Moss, our industrial partner, joined the firm. Another strong individual. If it's got a roll-up door, Mike knows everything about it. Probably the biggest factor that I attribute our success to has been the people that God has brought to us over those years, and then the ability to have the longevity there. With that kind of longevity in a firm, you have continuity with your clients, continuity working together, continuity with your systems and your processes. So we've been really blessed to have the people. In March of '88, the economy was in the tanks. We had the savings and loan crisis. You had banks being shut down, doors locked on huge financial institutions in downtown Miami. Watched just huge carnage in our industry with the amount of damage being done as a result of the economic cycles. But starting out in that time was a great foundation to learn to work harder, to learn that even when times are hard, that the tenants and the business owners want you to talk to them. And in that type of marketplace, when you continue to still apply your business plan and work hard, you can actually grow market share, which is what we did in the last cycle, in the 2010 rough times that we went through. Because of our outgoing marketing efforts and because of our involvement deeply in the community, we were able to grow our market share during the last downturn. So understanding that we're in a very cyclical business, being positioned lean and mean at all times, being aggressive with our marketing and our efforts, and working hard to have repeat clients over the years has really helped us get through those cycles. I love to watch the Discovery Channel shows with Alaska, and I love the outdoors, and I think about the people that live there, and wow, it must be pretty incredible to have to go kill what you eat, and if you don't kill, you don't eat. And it struck me one day watching that and talking with my wife that that's what we do. And that's our business, is if we don't get a transaction done, we don't eat. So there's a lot of intensity in our business. There's ups and downs. It's not a level, every week getting a paycheck. It's a great business, but it's unique. So without the support of your spouse and friends in an industry like this, it's very, very difficult. When I moved here in March of '88, I knew 3 people at the time. So the first thing I did was join the Melbourne Chamber of Commerce, and not just join, but to dive in. Pay my membership dues, but to dive in and join committees, and was very, very fortunate to get heavily involved in that organization off the bat and meet people like Harry and Wendy Brandon that we still work for Wendy, and just the relationships over those years that have been able to develop by giving back. There's a huge difference between just joining an organization and being involved in an organization. We've been involved in the EDC, probably the single most important organization in the county, in my opinion. We were involved deeply many, many years ago in the early 90s, about the time that things were getting really started. Was chairman in the late 90s and still on the executive committee. What Linda Weatherman and her team have done for our community is nothing short of miraculous. To take us from 2010, when 60 Minutes did a story on the death of the Space Coast, to where we are in 2020 today, I give most credit to Linda and her team for leading that charge and continuing to make our community better in every way. Many other organizations we're a part of. I'm on the board of directors for My Community Cares with Pastor Jarvis Wash, just an incredible person, love him dearly. We're heavily involved in Circles of Care. I'm vice chairman of Circles of Care this year. We have other partners that are involved in everything from Candlelighters to Brevard Rescue Mission to First Baptist of Melbourne. Our partners started the Fuel Men's Ministry a number of years back. So we're deeply involved in our community, very thankful for what our community has given back to us, but we believe that we've got to be part of it. One of the questions that I'm asked on a regular basis is, what's the succession plan, or what's your retirement plan? You got to be getting close to being done. And my answer to that's very clear. My father was working in Kabul, Afghanistan at 80 years old for the USAID program in telecommunications. And he had worked there a lot longer if they'd have let him. I'm only 59 at this point, so I've got a lot of years left to do this. I enjoy what I do. There's not a mandatory retirement like a pilot would have in our industry. To be able to continue to do this for a very long time is absolutely my plan, to follow in my dad's way of just continuing to work and use your mind and enjoy what you do.
Brian, I have to say that I admire you and you inspire me as an entrepreneur and as a business leader, but I also consider you a great friend and a great example. As we move on, what do you see as your biggest challenge facing the commercial real estate market in Brevard over, let's just say over the next 10 years?
He's on mute.
Brian, I think you're on mute there, buddy.
All right, how's that?
That's better.
Good, good, good. Peter's a technology guy, so I'm sure he won't make that same mistake. But great to see you too, Eric. Definitely look forward to getting back to meeting in person again soon. It's interesting. The biggest challenge that I see facing our firm in our area is a great problem to have, and that's keeping up with the demand. With all these companies coming to the area, generating new jobs, requiring space to support their businesses, that creates two challenges for our firm moving forward. One of which is inventory of existing properties. We're still in the mid to high 90% occupancies in most of our sectors today. So that, coupled with the cost of new construction, that's a challenge. Is how are we going to provide the facilities that we need in order to house these companies and jobs? From an LBR standpoint, the challenge is that we're going to require additional team members to continue providing the level of service that our customers are used to. So that's something that we have to get very intentional about over the upcoming years.
Brian, what do you look for in a team member? I mean, you're obviously someone who has, dealt with a lot of people. You're a highly motivated, very intelligent individual. And so when you're looking for people to become a part of your organization, I know you want them to be team members, but what are the kind of qualities you look for?
Great question. Our team member that fits with our company first and foremost has to really buy into our DNA and our culture. And we really are a family here at LBR, and very close and supportive of each of us from a business portion, but also from our personal life section. So the reality of it is that person's got to be driven. They've got to be focused. They've got to be a self-starter. They've got to be willing to dive into the discipline that we place them in and rise to the occasion. And our motto from Ecclesiastes 9:10 is whatever the hand finds to do it with thy might. So that applies to every single person within our organization.
That's great. Now, you alluded to the fact that you guys have ridden through some of the booms and the busts. And, what kind of words of advice or encouragement could you give to the audience here tonight as we're dealing with a situation that none of us have ever faced in our lifetimes?
Yep, great question again. The old adage, I know it's worn out, but in today's times, it's make hay while the sun shines. While the space toast economy today is much stronger than most economies in Florida and the country, it's not going to go straight up forever. So whether it's inflation issues or construction cost or who knows what other world issue that might impact us, at some point this economy is going to slow. So in the meantime, work hard, make hay while the sun shines, and grow conservatively. You have to be really careful in times like this not to overextend. We try to avoid debt when possible, and then save. That's save money both from a business perspective and a personal perspective, because the cycle will turn at some point.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's a great answer. I really appreciate your insights. Also, Brian, people look to your organization for especially commercial real estate intelligence. And, as you look out onto the horizon, what are the areas that you see that there might be investment potential in?
It's interesting because we, for many years, have been telling the story about Brevard County and the opportunities here. And definitely in 2021, we're seeing the investment opportunities begin to be driven by people outside of the area that are beginning to see what's going on here. And as a buddy of mine from Miami says, drink the Kool-Aid. There's a lot going on here. And we just closed a large transaction, Mike Moss and I, last month with an investment group out of New Jersey. We have a large project under contract now with a group out of Boston. We have several groups out of Miami pursuing it. So instead of a specific opportunity, we're viewing the Space Coast as your opportunity. Mm-hmm. The jobs are unlike any other place in the state. We're not retirement driven. We're not tourism driven. We're high paying job driven. And that's a game changer for everybody.
In the video, you mentioned your skills at cold calling and sales. That's a skill that not everybody has. But what can you say to the entrepreneurs in our audience? And we know as entrepreneurs, you got to sell. So what would you say about your experience and how you hone those skills?
Yeah, obviously, starting at Merrill Lynch and being taught to dial the phone 100 times a day didn't hurt. To not be afraid of it. But interestingly enough, in today's world, several years back, there was a commercial real estate Tech conference in New York City about the disruption and what's going on in the industry with technology. And I knew enough to know it was important, but I also knew enough to know that I didn't have a clue on what they were going to talk about. So we sent our resident millennial, Blake Robison, up to the conference and said, come back and tell us what this means to the future of how LBR grows our business. Blake came back and said, I got two things for you. One of which, regardless of technology, your business is always going to be about relationships. And the number two part of it, it's going to be the proper application of your knowledge to those relationships. We view our selling as really relationships, period. Zig Ziglar, the famous Baptist preacher, sales expert, always said, in order to get what you want, help enough other people get what they want. And whether that's today, too many people, in my opinion, think they can do that just off of social media. I think it's still got to be the face-to-face, whether that's the cold calling, the door knocking. I think the technology plays a role. We use social media effectively, the websites, email, et cetera, but it's just got to be out there building relationships.
Yeah, that's so true, Brian. Any sort of closing thoughts or pearls you want to share with the audience before we move along?
I just want to say that I consider myself very honored and humbled and blessed to even be on this tonight, especially in the company of people like Peter and Dana. I want to thank the Founders Forum and the Board of Directors for considering me for this, and that means a lot as well. I would offer this, whether you're watching tonight or on a video in the future, we consider ourselves at LBR Resources. And that means that if you have a question about commercial real estate, pick up the phone and call us, drop us an email. We're not going to send you a bill, for the time. We're happy to help people in any way we can. So again, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Life, and the entire Founders Forum board.
Hey, thank you, man. I so appreciate you coming and sharing with us. Bless you, man. Our next founder is Dana Kilborne, who is in the process of getting another business, Cypress Trust Company, started. As I said, Dana could be described as your stereotypical serial entrepreneur. We will show you her pre-recorded interview next, but since she was not available to be with us live, we cannot take any audience questions for her. But we do have some questions that members of our board asked that she was gracious enough to answer at the end of her presentation.
So Cypress Trust Company is in the business of trust management and investment management. So our clients across the state of Florida and really across much of the country have trusts that were left to them, and we administer those trust services in accordance with the donor's wishes, and we also in many cases, manage the underlying securities. I've been in financial services my whole career, mostly on the banking side, and started a bank before, and over the course of that period, ultimately I sold the bank in 2018. I was asked to go on the board of Cypress, just as a trust company, and said I would do it for a year. That year was up in March of last year. One thing led to another, and had some discussions with the primary shareholder to partner, recapitalize the company, partner with now her, take over Cypress, raise some money, and start a bank inside of Cypress. So that's what we're doing now. With the first bank, we opened at the end of 2004 and enter the Great Recession. And oftentimes the knee-jerk reaction when there's an economic crisis is to cut back credit. For us, we knew that there were lots of businesses that were managing through it well, and so we thought it was a good time to start expanding into additional relationships. We had a client that had their loans called by a larger bank, not because it was in default, but because it didn't look like the rest of the loans there. And in the time, for very good reason, everyone was very concerned about the credit losses in their respective companies. So they stood up and realized that this one looked different, didn't fit in a box, and and asked them to leave. And it was significant in size and certainly significant for the business owner. The company was referred to us, and we said, well, it doesn't look like everything else, but it's a great business. They'd been around at the time for 4 decades, so it wasn't going anywhere. Depth of management certainly had been battle tested during a number of economic cycles, including the one that we were in at the time. We happily took care of them, and they continued to be very grateful. I think every time we as a company had an opportunity to meet with a business owner, either individually or maybe there were a number of owners, and understand what they wanted to achieve, how we could help them get there. Every time we executed well on one of those opportunities, it was not only good for both of our businesses, but it was extremely gratifying and validating that we were in the right place doing the right work and that we had the right team. You know, the beauty of what we were doing in the banking segment and now doing in the trust segment is that every time we have one of these encounters with a client, we have a chance to do our best work. And it's everyone is different and unique, and that's why we do what we do. We are always focused on how do we build a company that is interesting to us, meaningful and value-based for our clients, and simultaneously, which is not mutually exclusive, creates value for our own company and for our shareholders. When I started Prime Bank in late 2004, Briggs and I moved here in 2000, and we had 3 kids. Our youngest was 3 when I was literally organizing the bank from our house. Before we opened, we had 5 employees working out of my house. My son was running around as a toddler at 3. We had the long blue cables, no wireless back then, and every day at 5 o'clock we would literally roll up the cables, put the bank away, and then I'd make dinner for my kids. You really can't do that without extraordinary support from your spouse. And your kids are really raised to be pretty independent. So the future of Cypress is pretty interesting. The company's actually been around. It'll be celebrating its 25th year next October. We've hired a CFO with whom I've worked before. We actually started our careers together. He is very talented. We also have identified some folks that we'll be bringing on board once we start the bank. So as we look at succession planning in our own organization now, we will have a short list of folks who could most certainly succeed me. I would encourage them to be curious. So ask why is it done this way? Maybe there's a better way to do it. Just because the puzzle may look solved, maybe there's a better way. So I think being curious is very helpful to being an entrepreneur and frankly being a good team member. We decided in March that we were going to go virtual, completely virtual. So in about a week's time, we went from 30 employees, most of whom were going into the office every day, to 30 employees who were now working from home. You know, the remote environment is not a new concept. The trend was, there was a trend that COVID really accelerated the trend, but we were already moving to flexible work environments, and most companies were. We are moving forward with our plan to move operations to Melbourne and open up a trust office here. The trust office will open before we have our bank approvals, and at the time we have our bank approvals, it will convert. We think it's important to have a physical presence in the markets in which we do business.
We have pre-recorded a segment with Dana answering some questions that members of our board had after viewing her video. Of course, if you've been in the area for any length of time, you will probably notice where Petty's Meat Market used to be is where Dana's new location is going to be. Dana, yours is a fascinating story of entrepreneurial courage, visionary business endeavors, and an amazing commitment to the overall growth and development of the region. Our board had the opportunity to review your video, and we came up with a few additional questions to help other business people in their ventures. We saw virtually no community bank startups since the financial crisis. Do you believe that we're moving back to a time of opportunity for growth in the community bank model?
I do. I don't think we'll ever return to the level of de novos that we had pre-recession, but we've gone from about 200 and over 250 banks 20 years ago in Florida to under 100. There is room for community banking. We talked a little bit about entrepreneurship and small businesses, which are really the sort of the sweet spot for traditional community banks. Business is defined as a small business, really, which is defined broadly as less than 500 employees, are responsible for 44% of the GDP in our country, and responsible also over the last 15 years for about 65% of the job growth, and really what is the sweet spot for community banks.
Dana, do you see the trust business as an opportunity for more stability and a potentially more stringent regulatory environment?
We do. Banking has always been a highly regulated environment. It's certainly not less so, but the trust business really brings some synergies to the client, we think. If you think about our sweet spot with small, medium-sized businesses, oftentimes at the end of those life cycles of those businesses comes a liquidity event. And leading up to that stage, business owners begin to think about looking for guidance to tee their companies up for a change in control, and they need help with a plan.
Do you see that as being a continued growth opportunity as you add new banking services to the venture with Cypress Trust?
For sure. I mean, Cypress Trust has been in existence. Actually, this is its 25th year. And so it is well established in the state of Florida as a trust company. We've got over $1 billion in assets. So there's some built-in client demand on that side. And as we surround the client really with all of the things that they need from a financial services standpoint, trust is certainly one of those services that we see a demand for.
Dana, the story you shared in your recorded interview calls to mind George Bailey, Jimmy Stewart, standing up to Mr. Potter and the big bank on behalf of local businesses and clients they knew personally were good for the loans.
Yeah.
Why is it important for entrepreneurs to have access to lenders willing to bet on them as much as the business?
There's a lot more to the story than just what appears in the financials. And really, business first has to make sense. And we look at management, their experience. We look at the business. How is this different? How is this business going to fit in this overall industry, whatever that industry is? And then we also look at the industry itself. What stage is the industry in? Are there other factors, structural changes that impact the industry that, even with the best management and perceived niche, the industry is just not, too many barriers to entry or whatever the reasons are. We look at kind of all of those things first. Next is we really think that it's important for them to have banking professionals that understand what their business goals are and what their personal goals are, because they're really interdependent, and spend some time getting to know the company, getting to know the business owner, so that over a long term, we can be helpful.
As a founder, you juggled work and kids from home in the early years. What was your secret for creating boundaries and balance between work and family time?
I think you have to decide what's really important and that the rest isn't. And so just kind of let it go.
We want to thank you for all that you have done to make this a better business environment as well as a better place to live.
Again, thanks for the time and thanks for all the Founders Forum does.
The final founder we will hear from this evening is Peter Dyson of Modus Operandi. Peter is with us live, so if you would like to ask a question, enter it in the chat box and we'll get Peter's answer after the end of his video. Here's Peter Dyson.
Our passion is all about harnessing data to help people make better decisions. How we do that is with software that orchestrates the power of human teamwork with the raw processing power of computers to analyze vast quantities of data. Our primary customer throughout the years has been the Department of Defense, but we've also served a number of commercial enterprises, and those span not-for-profits, utilities, banking, telecommunications, aerospace, and technology companies. Think about sort of the merger of, let's say, Facebook with Google, where you have an intuitive way of interacting and collaborating and communicating with people, your team, your peers, your colleagues, your friends, and yet you have access behind that to all sorts of data and all sorts of analysis of that data, and you bring that all together. You could say that we're doing that for mission-critical business problems. We call ourselves jokingly a carport startup because our lead founder didn't have a garage, so we couldn't be a garage startup. Fortunately, our other co-founder had a spacious living room, and so we used that as our main war room for launching the business. We wrote the original business plan over Memorial Day weekend in 1984. And we incorporated a few months later, and Ed took the initial leap and got the business started. So he was the first one, and then I joined the following spring. We often don't recognize the formative experiences that shape our future when they're first occurring with us. In my case, as a young boy, learning chess helped me become a better student. And that became especially important during middle school. I missed a bunch of schooling and ended up repeating a year due to an illness. Later, as a teen, I worked for my father and his businesses. And then in college, when I was at Washington University, I worked for Southwestern Bell. And that's probably the first place where I started getting into data. After college, I had a great early career at Harris Corporation as a software developer and leading small teams. Harris, with their software business, began a pivot. At about the same time, I was in the Florida Tech MBA program. The push and the pull that these formed, along with two eager co-founders, led to the creation of software productivity solutions, which later became Modus Operandi. Well, early on, we were out banging our heads against the wall trying to raise capital to build our software products, and that wasn't working. So we turned to the Small Business Innovation Research Program, SBIR, and we were able to obtain funding to develop technology and products through that program. And I would say in terms of things that have been really helpful to our success, the SBIR program certainly stands out. We've had several setbacks. The first one is we were launching one of our first products in the 1990s. We basically ran out of money. And our CEO, my co-founder, he was very passionate about this product. He lived and breathed it. Ultimately, we ended up splitting off a separate company so he could take that product and run with it. And that left me. That was when I became the CEO of what was then Software Productivity Solutions. After that was done and the companies were separated, we were deep in debt. But the good thing was we had some contracts coming in. And so that leads to my secret of cash. We all know that cash is king, but I like to say cash flow is queen. And we all know the queen is more powerful than the king. So with that cash flow coming in, we were able ultimately, it took us quite a while, almost a year, we were able to pay off all of our debts and resume growing again. By the late 1990s, we acquired another small company, and that's when we became Modus Operandi. We did that, if you remember the late 1990s, just before the dot-com boom and bust. And we had expanded into the commercial sector. And it's amazing how fast commercial companies can turn off spending. So our business shrank dramatically as a result. And by 2001, we were basically starting over. But we had two things that we didn't have 15 years earlier when we first started. First, we had a small, dedicated team. And second, we had some loyal customers. And these customers stuck with us and enabled us to weather that a very difficult period and ultimately come out the other side. And that leads to my secret of perseverance. The philosopher Edmund Burke said, "Never despair, but if you do, work on in despair." And that's exactly what we did. We changed strategy, we changed tactics, but we just kept at it. We kept working. Right now, this is a very exciting time for the company. We've just launched a new product called Movia, and we're pivoting our business to drive future growth around that Movia product. At the same time, we've been doing formal succession planning, basically preparing for the next generation of leaders to take over the reins from me. And these succession planning, it's shared openly within the company. And within the last 6 months, we've promoted from within to 2 people into more senior leadership positions as part of that planning. There's an eagerness of many people to take on more responsibility. But certain positions, particularly the senior leadership position, you also have to have the ability to do it. There's the risk of too much on-the-job learning is very high for the company. So we have some positions that will end up being filled externally. But part of our succession plan is that those folks would, rather than parachute in directly into that position, they would come in, they would learn the business and grow into it. It would all be with the shared that, hey, this is the plan, this is what this person's being brought in ultimately to do, and here's the path for how we're going to get them there. I am only the captain of our ship. Without my team, there would be no Modus Operandi. We have several employees with more than 20 years of service with the company, and a good handful with more than 10 years. It was Helen Keller who said, alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much. And that very much applies to Modus Operandi, and really is reflected in my secret of building a team.
I'll open up now for any questions you may have for Peter. Just enter those into the chat box. But let's start with one. Peter, you alluded to the challenge of corporate clients who dramatically reduce their spending very quickly. There are probably a lot of entrepreneurs that are in similar situations now with this current COVID-19 situation. Can you give any advice to those entrepreneurs as you've seen some ups and some downs? You've described some very challenging times where you kept on going when you might have thrown in the towel.
Absolutely. That's a very deep question. Before I answer that, I just want to say, hey, it's good to see you again. Thanks for all those kind words at the beginning, and we miss you at our CEO roundtable. Maybe you'll be back one day.
Yes.
Different businesses are impacted in different ways by COVID, and for some the challenges have been much greater, than I think what we faced. I would say probably the best advice that I could point to is what I talked about in the video, my secret of perseverance, and that's to maintain this unfettered faith in your ability to persevere through dark times, but also say that this faith alone is not enough. Your question actually had a part of the answer buried within it, and that's the need to recognize when you need to make a change or pivot in response to changes in the environment around you. When I was a student in the Florida Tech MBA program, I had a professor who described a concept that he called visor time. And this was basically recognized to the point at which you can see, you're flying your jet, and you can see no matter what I do, this jet is going down. When you get to that point, you have to recognize it. You have to realize your duty then changes to a duty of survival. And so you close your visor, you hit the eject button, and you have to know you did the right thing and just move on from there. I suspect that some businesses really are faced with that sort of existential threat. For Modus, when COVID hit, we were in the early phases of launching our product into a new market in the commercial space, and that particular opportunity just evaporated very quickly. The customers we were targeting were suddenly dealing with their own existential threats, which were posed by COVID. So we hit the pause button. We had other things going on, so we didn't have to hit the eject button. But we stepped back, and when I say we, I mean the team. So this was not just me, and I asked the team to work certain aspects of this and waited for them to work through it so that we would be moving together in unison. But especially looking at some of the opportunities we had with our traditional customer base. Ultimately, we dropped that commercial market initiative, and in spite of, we had a big emotional investment, a big investment of gold, and that we had made, but we said, look, it just doesn't make sense anymore. So what's the right path forward? The other thing to keep in mind as you're dealing with these challenges is you're really not alone. We often say it's lonely at the top, but as a leader, you're probably surrounded by people who share your desire to succeed, and they'll help you if asked and given the opportunity. And you can be expansive when you're thinking about this team. In the case of Modus Operandi, it's our employees, our board members, even our customers. And so these different stakeholders have all been an important part of us navigating the ups and downs that we faced in our business journey.
That's fascinating, Peter. Listening to your story, and again, we were in small groups together. You're very collaborative in your leadership approach. Is that reflected from your experiences and you grew into that, or is that just part of, sort of your personal DNA to be very collaborative in how decisions are made within your company?
Yes, it's a little of each. I would say, and to some extent, I used to, and I've realized you can't always do this. I used to say, look, I really want to make these decisions by consensus, but there's a difference between collaborative decision making and consensus-based decision making, because you can't always get consensus, but you can invite everybody to participate, to weigh in on a decision. And in many ways, the important thing is to really draw out the people who perhaps want to take a different course of action than the one maybe that you ultimately take, and understand the reasons, but also make sure that they understand the rationale behind the decision that you make. And we spend a lot of time doing that, but ultimately what that does for us, it perhaps slows down the decision making a little bit, but it accelerates the action on the decision, because you've got a lot more buy-in. Even from the folks who maybe say, well, I really think we should do A instead of B, we're going to do B, but they feel like they were heard in the discussion and potentially influenced in some way what you do. But you've got now that increase of the buy-in helps you move forward on the plan that you ultimately select.
That's you articulated that great. We have a question from a member of the audience, Vince Lamb. He asked, was your financial growth financed, or was your growth financed from retained earnings, outside capital, or both?
Mostly from retained earnings. We did have some folks that helped us. We did we spent a lot of time, as I mentioned in the video, trying to just get direct capital infusion to go build product. But we, with that not being successful, even though we got, I'll say most of our venture capital came from the SBIR program and some other R&D sponsors, there's still other capital needs you have. So we did a friends and family type round. And then a few years ago, we just got a huge boost of support through a program that was orchestrated. It was a state of Florida program that was orchestrated through the Economic Development Council that that Brian lauded, and I have to second that. But most of our war chest is from retained earnings. We take very little out, and we reinvest most everything. So we did at one point sell a business segment, and that put a little bit. That really was the seed money. I mean, this is now 15 years ago. That was the seed money for our war chest, and we just said, look, we got this money in. We're not going to spend it or distribute it. We're just going to keep it so that we can be a little more self-reliant when it comes to our capital structure.
When we were talking to Brian earlier, we talked about sales and how every entrepreneurial leader, every CEO has to be a salesman. And I know you have to sell your product to a very high level client, but nevertheless, you're selling to them. What are the key things you've learned about selling your products and even selling your company to potential investors? I mean, in order to gain capital, not to divest yourself.
Yeah. I think, unlike perhaps Brian, I was not a natural born or early trained salesman. So I actually ended up going to sales school to help me develop those skills, and found out, I was doing it all wrong. But I think one of the things that stuck with me the most, and I like to remind other salespeople of this when they go too far, is you have in a sales situation, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that proportion, because you should be asking questions and listening, and not just at some point the prospect, if you just go on and on about how wonderful your company or your product is, they'll just disengage. So a conversation becomes much more productive, and you can much better define or tailor a solution if you really listen to, and they understand that you're listening to and responding to the feedback that they give you.
That could work with my wife too, I think, Brian. Now, describe the conversation or the process when you severed the original partnership with the original founder of the company. Was that just something mutually agreed on? Was his passion carrying him someplace else? Describe that whole process.
Well, of course, I talk about that a little bit in the video. So this is going to expand on what I said there. It's really a great question, because that became a defining moment, both for the company and then for me as an entrepreneurial leader, because I was the guy behind the scenes. I was at the time the number 2, and so here we have this. It was very much often things happen because there's it's even like a sales situation. There's some sense of urgency, right, driving the need to do something, and to do something soon. And as I mentioned in the video, we were spending a lot of money trying to launch this product. It was called Inquisix, trying to launch this product that Ed was very passionate about. And we were taking every dollar we could out of the portion of the business that was, basically was the part that I was running, in order to help fund that. And yet we could see it just we weren't going to get there with the resources that we had. And at the same time, it was really difficult for Ed with, here we are, it's a government technology contracting company, and you want to go talk to an investor about putting money in to launch a product. It just was, the business model didn't line up. Right. And so what he really needed was, what we call a pure play, right, based around the product, so that he could attract investment. And so it was clear, okay, the path that we're on, the jet will crash, but we have time to do something. Mm-hmm. So I will say, though, confession, it was very stressful, because here is Ed, had been my mentor, and now we're on somewhat the opposite sides of a issue where the future of the company is at stake. Because he wants to go in one direction, which we really didn't have the ability to do, and I think he understood that. But still, he had built this company, right? And here I am, say, well, if we stay that course, we're just going to run out of money, and we're in debt that somehow we had to figure out a way to pay these debts. So It was a lot of difficult conversations. Some of it was kind of okay. We have other stakeholders. It's not just Ed and I, although between us, we're the majority shareholders. What did the other stakeholders view about this? That was multiple conversations. But given what we both wanted, right? I wanted to protect what we had created so far, and Ed wanted to run with this passion, this product that he was passionate about.
Sure.
So, ultimately, and those were some pretty, stressful. And I at the time, I'd never been through anything like that. Although I realize as I've met people, I'm not unique. Usually, you don't have that kind of thing happen to you more than once. So it's like, if only I had known some of the people I know now. How did you navigate that?
Right.
We did it just somehow work through it, and a lot of respect for Ed, and still do. Brilliant guy. And I said, if anybody can do this, it's him. So eventually he created a separate company. We put in the product and a little bit of capital, not very much because we were already in debt. And he, in exchange for that, he paid us for those assets with his ownership interest in Modus Operandi. It's called Software Productivity Solutions at the time.
I see. Fascinating. We're going to have to wind this up. The conversation, for me, this could go on for hours.
Indeed.
And what I'd like to do is bring Brian back up, and just curious. One question I like to ask entrepreneurs, business people is if the DeLorean pulled up and you could go back to the future to the year you founded your company, what do you wish you knew then, or what would you tell yourself as in that founding year, if you had that ability to go back in time and tell yourself? And I'll ask Brian first because here I've had Peter talking here for a while.
Well, first, I'm just glad that I have my voice unmuted to start with. So, but no, that's a great question. When I look back over and I think about it on a regular basis, that starting in this company 25 years ago in an executive suite at One Harbor Place by myself, to where God has blessed us to be able to be today. Certainly there's some decisions that I probably would have done a little bit differently, but I am just very, very grateful for the blessings that we have today and where our company is positioned.
That's great. Peter, what about you? Any advice you would give yourself?
This is only half in jest, but I would have strongly recommended that I learn to play golf. But I think in many ways we did so many things the hard way. And so it's just kind of to the way we went about developing a product and the way we capitalized it. We missed some market opportunities because it's a slow way to go about it. And so I would have said, look, we need to find some ways, different paths in order to get there faster. There aren't too many things where I said, boy, I really wish we hadn't done that or do over. But there's just so much you learn by going down this journey.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I admire about both of you, and I'm fortunate to say that I know each of you pretty well, is that you're lifelong learners. You never stop learning. I mean, Peter, go take a sales course, and learn that skill, because I see a deficiency, and I know that about Brian as well. You're always learning, and that's why you're always succeeding. I want to thank all of you for joining us during this presentation. Founders Forum, as we said, is dedicated to providing the kind of access to successful, locally based entrepreneurs that you're going to find nowhere else. And I encourage you to go to our website and view the presentation of past founders. And stay tuned for future events, which we hope will soon transition back to live presentations. And in the meantime, stay courageous, stay innovative, and stay connected and engaged in this incredible, dynamic community. Good night. God bless.